Alright, enough lurking in the Reddit comment sections. Let's bring these design problems to a spotlight. Hi, my name is Amy and I've spent the past 10 years in an interior design and an architecture school, along with some jobs in the field, but that's for another day. And if there's one thing that I'm sure of, is that no two rooms can or even should feel the same. Think about it. A house isn't just four walls and a Pinterest board. It's a living and breathing extension of you. It should hug you on the bad days, hype you up on the good ones, and most importantly, make sense for your life. But here's the problem. The generic advice on the internet doesn't really cut it. Try a minimalist approach is not really going to work if you're a maximalist at heart. Or an important advice like add storage doesn't really make any sense if you don't really know how, where, or why. And that's exactly what we're dealing with today. I've picked two rooms from Reddit from the Design My Room community. And I'm not giving the quick fixes here, but rather tailored advice, which is designed for real people, real needs, and really the real life mess. We're talking layouts, decor, color palettes, and that missing something. Let's be real, when we're living in the same space every day, we start to tune out the little intricacies. We get so used to this clutter that we stop seeing them altogether. It's like a blind spot towards them. And that's where the fresh eyes can make all the difference. So let's help our fellow Redditors break out of their design rut. Layouts can really make or break the space. You could have all the correct pieces, but if the layout isn't correct, the space can really feel unbalanced and disconnected. And this brings us to our first challenge from a Reddit user in the Design My Room community. They shared their living room, which at first glance seems spacious and somewhat inviting, but the layout feels off. And I get it. Zoning a living space with proper framing in an open plan can be quite challenging at times. They asked, we don't want to get rid of this couch. How should it be laid out? What furniture do we need to get? The TV stand is temporary and we like where the blue cabinet is, but can move if there's a better idea. Alright, first off, let's take a minute to appreciate the classical dark blue cabinet here. I believe this is the piece with the most personality and character in the space, and it's the most left out piece disconnected from the living room. This blue cabinet could be a great starting point. This could serve as the inspiration for bringing in that pop of color to the space that is currently missing in otherwise neutral palette. Something about this layout feels quite off, right? The sofa is pushed against the largest wall, as I said before, and the TV sits opposite the window, making the space feel oddly stretched out. There's this vast unused floor area in the middle, almost like the furniture is afraid to step forward. Now, they did try a second layout. I'll put it on the screen here. And you can see in this image, while it's an improvement, it still has its challenges. The TV has moved to a better location, so there would be less glare from the window. And the accent launcher near the window defines a better nook. It has a more cozy placement, I would say. But here's the catch. The setup still feels too enclosed. See how the entrance into the seating zone is tight? And that long bare sofa back creates a visual block to the space instead of an inviting flow. If you were to keep this layout, I would go ahead and add a sideboard, something like a storage table as you can see in the image here. And this would make the setup look more complete, as it's not really nice to look at that bare wall of the sofa currently. But what if I say there's a better layout? Let's push the thinking a little further and let's go back to the plan. What if we rotated the sofa to sit opposite the window instead? Of course, the side of the chaise needs to be switched in this case, but this shifts the entire energy of the space. Suddenly, the seating area becomes more open and inviting, and we reclaim that awkward negative space we had before with this floating chaise of the sofa extending a little bit word, framing the seating zone. Well, that said, let's check it out in a visual. Alright. First things first, we need to clear out the space and give it the well-deserved refresh. A fresh coat of paint is always a good start. I would personally go for a bright beige as it instantly lifts the space. It makes it look not just bigger but also a bit brighter. As you can see, it's a little bit more inviting than before. It's neutral, but it's not too boring. Next, I would like to tackle the entertainment setup. I would now go for something that's more of a low profile sideboard with the TV center to it. This one is a little longer in length but shorter, so it adds more depth to the bottom part of the wall. Also, all the space inside the console would help you hide all that unnecessary wiring, remotes, routers, you name it. Now I think we have more of a focal point to the room. It's more intentional rather than just floating by itself on a wall. Next, I would like to give this console some company. A plant and a lamp on either side would just do the trick. But here's a little switch. As you can see in the previous one, the plant is placed in a darker corner and the lamp is placed closer to the window. I would switch the two. This switch will allow for the plant to receive more natural daylight and the lamp will be used to lighten up the darker corner of the room. So I think it's a win-win. Okay, so far so good. Now I think the next thing that needs to be moving is the chase. Okay, hear me out on this one. I would place the sofa with its back facing the solid wall and the chase would subtly extend, giving more of a framing to the zone, as you can see in the image. It not only is maximizing the flow in the space, but it also helps the seating arrangement feel a little more structured and cohesive, I would say. Usually I'm not a big fan of these chase sofas, but in this case, I think it makes sense that it's a little seat extending without a back. It helps keep the visual connection on either side of the chase. Trust me, small tweaks like this can make a big difference. So bear with me on the next one. Now I'm going to introduce a little bit of personality with a burnt orange accent chair. Yes, we're going for this because I think it adds a vibrant contrast, as you can see, to the otherwise neutral palette. It's a bit more warm and inviting and it adds the right amount of boldness to the space. Next thing I'm gonna add is a rug. A rug is like a glue. It ties everything together in the space. Since we're working with these warm and neutral tones, and don't forget the blue from the cabinet, that's something I really want to bring in. I'd go for something that echoes those hues and something that's a little bit more unique for this space. So we'll go with this rug. I really like this rug because I think it has the perfect amount of the blues and the oranges compared to the neutrals. I think it really looks good in this space. The next thing that I would like to change is the curtains. The current ones are blending right to the walls, so you cannot really see the difference, which sometimes works, but in this case I feel we should take some inspiration from the vertical blue cabinet on the other side of the living room. I would go for some curtains that reflect that blue color a little more. So let's go with some dark blue curtains, more like a soft velvet touch. They could be blackout curtains, and I really like the blinds that you currently have. You could keep those blinds and have blackout curtains that just frame the window during the day while still allowing for natural light to come in the space. I would go for floor to ceiling curtains because they make the wall look much more framed and a little bit better. It's a subtle move, or it could be a bold move for some, but it really makes the difference, as you can see in both the images. So far in this room, everything is a bit more like a square or a rectangle. So for the coffee table, I'll introduce a round element. I'll go for a low wood round coffee table, as it will allow for better circulation flow around the space, and it just brings some softness in this otherwise angled room. And I would go ahead and definitely add some books or some decorative items on this table to make the space feel more lived in and curated. I think it adds a touch of personality, and these are the little details that really make two homes different from one another. Now that everything is coming together, this burnt orange accent chair looks alone by itself and maybe deserves a sidekick. So let's go ahead and add a small coffee table next to it with a warm table lamp. It completes the setup. Usually they suggest to go for 3 lighting sources in a room, and in this image I see no overhead lighting really, so one floor lamp in the corner along with a small table lamp on this coffee table would do great. Adding this little coffee table makes the placement of the orange chair look a little bit more intentional. And now I think it's a proper reading or a conversation nook. What do you think? Tell me in the comments. I really like editing these spaces and I would love to hear from you. What would you do if this was your house? Now I see that the left side of the space is looking quite neutral, while the right side is bringing all the color and the fun. So to to balance things out here, we'll pull some color from the right and introduce it in form of maybe artwork on the walls. So hear me out on the artwork here. Don't go for something that's generic or mass produced just for the sake of filling up the wall. You should really select some curated pieces because you're going to live with this piece every day. You are going to look at it. So let's take this opportunity to add something to our walls that would spark an emotion or something that's a personal memory for you. And for the frame of this artwork, I would go for a nice dark wood, or maybe even to bring in some metallic elements, you could go for some brushed antique brass, and I think that would blend in really well. Now that everything has some color and some joy in it, I feel like the couch is standing out and it looks very bare. So I would go ahead and add some cushions in bright colors, something that reflects from the walls, or the burnt orange chair. And you can see this helps to add that final touch that ties everything together. And that's it. A simple yet an impactful transformation that subtly brings in the balance, the color, and just makes it feel more cohesive. What do you think? Are we liking it so far? Have you thought how it would look in the night scenario, for example? I'll put up an image here. Let's take a look at the other side with the blue cabinet as well. You notice how the warm lighting, the dark furniture, and all these chosen elements, they blend in more seamlessly. I think it's all about those little individual choices that help you make a space that's more cohesive and balanced. Here, each element holds its own value, yet they interact effortlessly with one another. Let's move on to the next one. Accent walls. Love them or fear them. They are not always easy to get right. In a compact space, a fresh coat of paint or a wallpaper could do the job. But when that stretches across a larger backdrop, you need to be a little bit more intentional with what story it is telling. And that said, the next dilemma comes from another Reddit user in the same community who posted about their rather expansive green wall, and they asked, I just moved into a new place and want to add a sideboard to fill the gap between the radiator and the wall. The height will be similar to the radiator and it will be about 45 centimeter wide. I'm thinking of a wood in a similar tone to my table. Will this look good in my living room? That's a good question. Alright, first off, solid instincts. I think a sideboard would really help solve the problem of functionality, and it will also add depth to the wall behind. But here's the catch. The radiator is already making a bit of material mismatch, and if we plop down a third material in this space without some strategic balancing, it will really make this green zone a lot more noticeable. So let's smooth out the contrast and make this composition feel a little bit more intentional. In this layout, I think this is the kitchen here that flows into a nice dining space with a dark wall backdrop, further extending into a living space with a couch, center table, and the television. This dining table here has a bench instead of two chairs, which I think is an excellent choice, as it really layers the zone without blocking the sidelines from the dining area to the television. I think this is really good because it keeps things open while maintaining a bit of functionality. But back to the wall. Here's what I would do. Let's kick things off by extending that beautiful accent color to the little edge on the left corner, which is currently white. Trust me, the white patch currently looks like a tiny crack to this, but if we paint it green, we're giving a little side hug to this wall in green and it makes it feel more complete. Now about the sideboard. I think the warm wood tones that reflect the same color as the dining table would look really good. We want to build a cohesive rhythm throughout, so we have to be always careful with what wooden elements we currently have, and that helps you make better choices about what you should buy. I will also be a little bit careful with the measurements of the sideboard. I advise you to leave a 10 to 12 centimeter gap between the radiator and the sideboard because we want to make things nice, but we don't really want a bonfire in here, so that's just for safety. Now we have these three little boxes of wood, white radiator, and the green accent wall. I'll place a wooden plank on top of the sideboard, but I would like to cantilever it over the radiator so it's more of a smoother edge for two elements. If this is not possible, then I would go for an additional plank on the sideboard along with a shelf that is on the same height over the radiator. And then the radiator, you can cover it, as you can see in the image, with a radiator cover. You can buy a lot of these on Etsy, and I would advise you to paint it in the same color as the wall currently is so that it merges into the wall and we don't see the white radiator as much. These these radiator covers are designed with perfect amount of ventilation so the heat is not trapped inside, but this is what I would do. Now that the left side is shaping up, I would bring a nice element to the right side. Currently everything is very horizontal, so to give it a break, I would add a tall plant in this nook. It will give the space that really needed vertical element that it's missing. Also, I would go for a rotten basket or something that looks more earthy because it brings more visual warmth to the space. It's a very small detail change, but it really makes a huge impact. I'll also place the small plant on the sideboard and it will accommodate itself later in the scenery. Here's where the magic happens. Let's begin with placing some art. I would go for a big art piece paired with a small one on its edge. It will make a statement without feeling overdone. Again, about the artwork, don't go for something that's mass produced. Choose something that you would enjoy looking at every day. It's gonna live with you in the space. I am also adding these two smaller frames vertically stacked on the white wall, and for this framing I will choose something maybe in the green tone as the wall, so it looks like an element pulled out of the wall, and now this white side edge is also part of the space. Let's go ahead, maybe add some books, a mug. These are all the little details that make the change. The next thing very important is the lighting. I'll add a table lamp in the left corner, and on the radiator, maybe center it to the radiator cover, I will add a little wall sconce. The goal here is to keep the symmetry while still being playful with it. Right now, I also feel the sideboard and the dining table are obviously blending into one another because we have chosen something that's in very similar shade. I would like to break that a little bit and give the dining table maybe a little bit personality of its own. So what I would do is add a tablecloth, also in some shades that are already in your artwork, or maybe the green from the wall, and this helps in keeping that cohesion. And next, to bring in some tactile richness, I'll style it with a tray of plants and candles. They're perfect for those soft ambient evening moments. A very important thing is a rug for this space, as it will really help separate the zone. So in this case, I'll go for a jute rug underneath the dining setup. It's kind of mirroring this texture of the rotten planter that we just chose, and believe me on this one, when you walk from a different surface, in this case rather a cold wood, onto the jute rug, it subtly reinforces the zoning of the space a little bit better in your mind because you can feel it underneath your feet. And now I think we've got a beautifully layered dining nook, but we don't want it to feel like an island isolated from the rest of the space. So let's bridge this gap. I would toss a beige cushion along with a green one as a memory from the wall. And I think it's that subtle connection that ties everything together in the space. And for a cozy finish, I would throw a burnt brown blanket on the sofa because right now it's gray and feels a little bit cold. But this warm brown shade coming out from the jute elements will really help enhance the warmth on the sofa. Layers of textiles are somehow your lottery ticket to a space that feels a lot more lived in and full of character. And finally, if your electric setup allows, why not go an extra mile and put a pendant light? But if that's not a possibility, then you could just add a floor lamp, something that's more leaning forward with the pendant hanging over the dining setup. And this will really help you define the space. Spotlights are fine for practical use, but they don't really win any awards for atmosphere, I'll be honest. It makes it feel like a hospital room. When you've got these table lamps, sconces, and floor lamps, as you can see, you're shaping more than just a well-lit room. You're setting a mood in the space. Alright, my final thoughts on this one. Yes, a sideboard would definitely help. But when you add these thoughtful details and these different layers, the sideboard will not just exist in the room, it will rather belong to the space. Alright, and that's a wrap for today. If you like what we're building here and would like some advice for your own space, make sure to send some horizontal pictures of your space to this email below. I might just feature your space in my next video. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button and maybe share this with someone whose room desperately needs a makeover.